A Reader's Paradise podcast, featuring interviews with celebrity authors, audiobook narrators, and readers just like you. So, kick off your shoes, bring your glass of wine, and join us on the beach for some fun, great stories, and literary laughter. Hello, and welcome to another edition of A Reader's Paradise. Say, if you like what you hear, please feel free to share a link to the show with everyone who loves good interviews with great authors. And today, folks, we have a wonderful, wonderful author, a romance author that I want to introduce you to, Natasha Frazier. And here's a little bit about her. Natasha fell in love around the age of 12 because of artists like Babyface, Boyz II Men, Whitney Houston, and New Edition. Well, that's all you need to fall in love and listen to those guys. Around 16 when her mother purchased, around 16 when her mother purchased a romance novel and left it lying around the house untouched. Natasha read it, and a spark for the written word had been ignited. Since 2012, Natasha has penned both fiction and devotional titles. She believes that writing is one of her life's purposes and contributes to the world. She feels accomplished when she can get a few words written like blah when life gets in the way. Her hope is that at the end of every novel, readers feel like they've been wrapped up in a cozy blanket with a mug of their favorite coffee, tea, or warm drink. I guess that's some wine if you want that warm drink. Natasha is also a member of Alpha Chi Alpha Sorority, Inc., and the Jackson State University Houston Area Alumni Center. She resides in Houston, Texas with her husband, Eddie Frazier Jr., and her 3 children, Ethan, and Emmeline. Her greatest joy and commitment is to her family, who she hopes to inspire above all else. One of her many mottos in life is faith moves limitations. Natasha, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'm so glad you're here. Now that was the standard business bio. I know there's more to you than that, so please feel free to expound upon anything else that you want to share with the listeners.
Okay, so let's talk about first. It's Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Inc. So when my mom bought this book, I don't know if you're familiar with the BET, the Arabesque romance novels.
I'm very familiar with those.
Yeah. And of course, probably around the age of 15, 16, I should not have been reading it. But she would buy them and she wouldn't touch them at all. And so one day I said, Mom, can I read that book? And she, sure, go ahead. And so after that, every time she would go to the store, like, hey, just grab me another one of those books. And from then on, I just loved love. That's all I read. And so I then kind of had this idea of wanting to write. And I remember, I think I had to be around, I was about a sophomore in high school, I think, and sometimes you have to write these papers, and we were on some type of fiction assignment. And so I was having this rift with, I've never talked about this before. I was having this rift with another girl in class. And so, of course, I made up a story about something not so good happening to her. But I changed her name. It was very close to her name. And I can recall the teacher calling me up, to her desk and asking me if it was this person. Of course, I didn't tell the truth. But it's like, no, of course not. I just made it up. But, she, at that point, she started encouraging me in my writing. And I actually still have a note from her to this day where she wished me well and said that she thought that I was a great writer. And so fast forward to the time I got ready to go to college. I was majoring in business administration. And I can remember right before classes start, the freshmen get there early. So we get a chance to, walk around, get a feel for the school, find our classes. And the girl who stayed in the room next door to me down the hall was an English major. And we had gone, I went to her building with her, and I saw like all these different jobs you could do if you majored in English, and writing was one of them. But at that time I'm thinking, okay, I got to make money. You know, I can't make money doing any of this stuff. So kept my major as business administration. But later on I did change it to accounting, but I stayed in the business school. And so time went on. I went to grad school to get my master's in accounting. And the idea of writing kind of started weighing on me heavily around that time. But I wasn't quite sure how to go about it. And I was also at a point in my faith where I was trying to live pleasing to God. So I didn't quite know how to mix this romance that I've been reading with this life that, you know, I was trying to live together. So I didn't do anything with it. Fast forward another, let's see, maybe 4 or 5 years, the idea of writing came upon me again. And at this point, I did start writing a little bit, but I didn't do anything with it. And so now time is really getting away from me because another year or so has passed. And I can remember sitting in church and the pastor speaking, and, you know, I felt like he was talking directly to me. And I've been, you know, studying and reading my Bible, and then I read Joshua 18:3. And it says, how long are you going to wait before you take possession of the land the Lord your God has already given to you? And so for me, that reminded me of my own procrastination because, you know, I had put all these different things in the way of why I couldn't get started and why I couldn't do it. And so, you know, out of that experience came my very first book, which is The Life Your Spirit Craves. And that book is a devotional journal, just encouraging people to seek what it is that God is leading them to do. Because a lot of times we put hurdles in the way. And so it could be time, it could be resources, finances, worried about whether or not people are going to support us, all these different kinds of things when a lot of times we just need to move. So that, you know, I started writing then, and here's where I am now.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. You know, that reminds me, some people would call it the calling, where it's just constantly gnawing on your consciousness, like you need to do this. You need to do this. I remember when I first started writing, I put up all sorts of excuses as to why I couldn't. But eventually I got around to it, and, you know, I sat down and I wrote that first book, which I look back on. At the time, I thought it was a masterpiece. But I look back on it now and I go, oh my God.
I know. I can relate.
You can relate. So this is a good segue into an interesting thing, because a lot of us, you know, when we're young, especially in that junior high school age, we find out, you know, that, you know, there's some, you know, kind of steamy stuff in books or romance books or what have you. And I was certainly the kid who, you know, would go around with a book that was dog-eared, you know, on the page that had the good stuff, you know. And I was like, ooh, look at what somebody wrote, you know. I mean, Judy Blume was like, you know, I was like, oh my God, you know, this was in the library. Look at what they have in the library, Judy Blume. So I remember for me being a little, for me as a guy, and during that time, it was difficult for me to be a guy and walk around reading a book because it wasn't considered masculine at the time. Right. You know, girls could read all the time with no problem. But, you know, if you're a guy reading a book, you know, at the time, you know, you were going to get clowned is what they called it back then. But, you know, I was smart, you know, and I kept reading. And so what this brings me to is my next question, because you're a romance writer. And I know you have a book coming out called With Every Breath. But what I want to talk about a little bit is just the idea of romance. You know, we are human beings. And at some point, you know, we're going to want to, you know, have that great romance. But one of the interesting things I always hear from particularly women is, I want him to romance me. And guys, you know, your rank and file guys are like, well, what does that mean? So, so with that being said, can you give the listeners some ideas, especially for those men who may be listening? When a woman says, "I'm looking for a romantic man," what does that mean to you?
I think it depends on the person, and especially after you're married for a while. I think romance could be he washed the dishes today, because he freed up my time, so now I can relax. Romance could be him. And my husband likes to do romantic stuff, so like I think it was this past Valentine's Day. So he ran me a bubble bath with rose petals in the tub. And, I've never had that before, and that was really nice. That was really romantic. But I think it would come down to the person. And I'll say this, and it's funny that you bring that up because again, I was young, I guess. So back in high school, and I was reading these books, and I can recall my boyfriend at the time saying, "Okay, you're reading too many of those romance novels. Like you're expecting me to do stuff that you read about, and that's not realistic." And so, my comment to that is it depends on the person, I think, because it could be a romantic dinner, cooking her favorite dinner or taking her to a favorite restaurant with a bottle of wine. It could be sitting on the couch with her, rubbing her feet, watching a Hallmark movie. So I think it kind of comes down to how that person receives love, how they like to receive love or be shown love, and that is how I think you can kind of boil it down to how somebody would perceive romance. Because maybe, what may be romantic to one person may not be romantic to another.
Now, let me ask you this. I'm going to flip the question around a little bit. Mm-hmm. What do you think guys think about when they think romance? Like, if you're a woman and you want to romance a guy, or if you have a character in a book that's a woman and she wants to romance a guy, what do you think guys look for when they want to be romanced? Because we always say, there's always a lot of pressure put on men to romance the woman. But I want to switch it around and give the woman the power. And how does a woman romance a man?
I would think, like if he likes sports, romancing him could be, getting tickets to his favorite NFL team, and taking him to a game, because that's what he loves. And so now you're feeding them where they're hungry. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So you're giving me something that I really want. Romance could be, buying him that new grill he wants, because he likes to grill, right? And so you're showing me that you hear me, you see me, you know what I like and I love, and you're giving me that. And so I think that is, how you can romance a man. That's just my personal opinion.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And, as quiet as it's kept, I think men also, at some point, especially if they're into their lover and they're into the person, intimate conversation also goes a very long way to establishing, that, connection to somebody. Like you feel like this person gets me and I don't want to, that sort of thing. And that's so important in a relationship when a person gets you, or when you find the person who gets you. That's a big one. That's a win-win. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Because so many times we kind of skip over that or devalue just sitting down having a nice conversation with one another. A lot of times we don't spend enough time doing that and getting to know the other person.
Yeah, and I forgot where I heard this, but it's always stuck with me. And I think it was a pastor from somewhere, and he said, "Men, I want you to listen up." And he says, "Women, they're designed to multiply. Whatever you give them, they multiply it and they give it back to you. You take them to the grocery store, they'll multiply it and they'll make you a dinner. You go buy a home, they'll multiply it and give you a house. You make love to them, they'll multiply it and give you children." So remember, men, that women are designed to multiply whatever you give to them. So if you give them love, they'll multiply it and give you heaven. And if you give them hell, well, they'll multiply it and give and give you, hell on wheels. So
Seems like some sound advice.
yeah, that's some sound advice, isn't it? So with that being said, one of the interesting things that I always like to ask writers, and that is, what is the first book that you read that made you cry? Or do you have a book like that? A book that made you cry, or a book that you can read time and again?
I can't say I've read anything that's made me cry. But also, an interesting fact about me is that I don't reread books. Once I read it, no, I do not reread. I'm done. The only thing I've reread over is, the Bible. But I don't reread books because there are so many out there to read. And also, I know what's going to happen. So I can't read it again.
Okay.
I move on to the next thing.
Okay.
When I was, I told you I read the Arabesque romance novels, and I often traded books with my cousins who also read them. Like, they would reread, but I can't, because I know what's going to happen.
Gotcha. Well, let me ask you this. Is there a favorite book that you have? A book that you read and you're like, oh my God, I have to recommend this to somebody. Besides your own.
No, of course. Let's see. I would say, I'll tell you that the last book I read, I really enjoyed. And that's An Unlikely Proposal by Tony Shiloh. I thought that was a really sweet read.
Wonderful. Let me ask you this, and this is a fun question I like to ask. If you could have dinner with any writer, either who has passed or living, who would that writer be?
Oh my gosh. That is hard.
I know for me,
think about that.
Right. Well, for me, it would be Zora Neale Hurston, or that would be one of the one. It would be Zora Neale Hurston or Phyllis Wheatley would be, my two picks. But Zora Neale Hurston, I was introduced to her in college. I had never heard of her. And when I was introduced to her and her writing in college, it just opened up my world. And the first book that I read by her was Their Eyes Were Watching God. And I read that book in a day. I could not put it down. And afterwards, I was just so moved by the characters and everything that happened that I was just like, oh my God, I felt like I fell in love with the characters. I just absolutely fell in love with them. And even the character Mr., who, she ended up hating, but he had a line in that book that always stuck with me because the relationship had turned bitter, and he had a lot of resentment. So even when she was trying to nurse him back to health, he looked at her and he said, I hope you get struck by thunder and lightning. I was like, what a thing to say. There's some real built up resentment.
I know.
Thunder and lightning, really? You pulled out the thunder and lightning? And she's sitting there trying to nurse you back to health. But that sounds like, that was a character that just wasn't, who wasn't full, who wasn't whole, who could appreciate the character or the type of woman that Zora Neale Hurston had, portrayed in the novel. So that's one of the reasons why I would really love to sit down with Zora Neale Hurston, over, a cup of tea and some pastries and just listen.
I think, for me, maybe it will be Maya Angelou, because she just seemed like a woman who has so much wisdom. And, I've always sort of kind of been at the feet of people who are much older than me. And so I think that is probably one of the people that I would choose. I would have liked to sit with her and just listen to her talk. She could be talking about anything. I'm sure I can pull some out of it because she just seemed like a person who has so much wisdom.
Yeah, you could sit down with Maya Angelou and just you can just say, just keep talking. I just,
Yeah.
something will fill up my head. Something will come through.
Right.
Something will come through here. Well, let me ask you a little bit about your writing process. When you decide to write, are you a morning writer or an evening writer? Do you start with the end first, or you start with the beginning first? Can you take us through what your writing process is like?
Okay. First of all, I got to start at the beginning and go straight through. I've talked to authors who can write just like any random chapter at a time. I cannot do that. I would be so thrown off. But generally, I write at night because, and that's because that's when my kids are asleep, my husband is asleep, and I don't have anybody reaching for my time. I can just sit and peck at the keyboard. Just with this most recent book, that is actually the first one that I've actually plotted. The book With Every Breath that's coming out on October 5th. Before then, I would just sit down and write. But with that one, I did something a little different. I even I casted, my characters. I found people online who I thought would be good for, who I envisioned in my head for the characters to be. So I put them together on a piece of paper, printed it out, and put it on my wall so I could see them. And they helped me with the dialogue as well when I was writing that story. So that is something different that I did for that one.
Okay, so speaking of your new title, what was the inspiration for the book? And tell us a little bit about what the book is about.
Okay, so I love second chance romances because in life we don't always get things together. We don't get it right the first time, and sometimes we never get a chance to go back and right our wrongs. And so I'm a graduate of Jackson State University, and I had this idea of taking two college sweethearts who didn't quite, the relationship didn't work out, and I wanted them to meet together and rekindle their relationship over a trip out of the country. And so I had that idea in my mind, but I didn't quite know how I would go about getting it out. I hadn't fleshed the story out. And so as I was developing the characters, trying to think about, what their occupations would be, and, how exactly they would meet up, earlier this year, around February, I had this bout with vertigo. And so vertigo is the spinning sensation. And it started last year, but it went away. But earlier this year when it came about, it felt like death. I mean, just sitting down in a room, just constantly spinning. Like, I thought that was the end of me. But, talked to my doctor, and she said that it wasn't as serious as I thought it was. So I started thinking, like, oh, my goodness, I can amp this up 1,000 and give this problem to my character.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did. So, but her condition is much more serious than that. And so that's how the story sort of started developing. So we have the main character. Her name is Nina Robinson. She's a motivational speaker. And so for the past 10 years or so, she's been, across national stages, giving speeches, encouraging women in all walks of life. And she receives this, she passes out after one of her last speaking events, and she receives this terminal diagnosis. And she has one more speech to give, because this is towards the end of the year, right after Thanksgiving. And she is a commencement speaker at Jackson State University. So here is where her college sweetheart, he also works. He's an instructor at Jackson State in the College of Education, on the verge of getting tenure and becoming a professor. So, and his name is Andrew McCall. So Andrew is getting his application packet together. The last thing he has to do is make sure his research paper is intact. And, he can send me his application because he's at the point he's pretty sure that, this is going to happen for him. He just has to get this research paper intact. And so, but when he comes face to face with Nina again, she asks him to go out of the country with her. And, of course he still loves her, but he's not, wanting to turn his life upside down for her again. And so that's where we have the problem. So with him, if he decides to go out of the country with her, then he risks not getting everything together so that he can get his promotion. But also, he has promised his father that he would come home and run the family business if he doesn't get promoted. And so he's sort of he's in a pickle.
Yeah, especially if she still has the ability to pull the emotional strings that were severed the first time around. And boy, I'm quite sure that there are people all over the world who did not know what they had until it was gone. Mm-hmm. And would love a second chance to see what life would have been if things had turned out differently. Now, with that said, do you have a segment or a snippet from your book that you could read to us and share with us?
Absolutely.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to count you down from 5, and then I'll say go, and then you go. All right?
Okay.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
The walk through the plaza reminded her of her old college days when she and Andrew strolled through campus hand in hand, days when she party walked mid-afternoon with her sorority sisters, and days when she could smell the aroma of her favorite entree wafting from the cast. Though almost everything had changed, this was still her dear old college home, the place where she'd grown up. It taught her independence and introduced her to the love of her life. And in turn, she walked away from him like life would offer her another opportunity to love again. It didn't. Nina took a deep breath and pulled open the door to the College of Education, where she was greeted by an 8-foot Christmas tree in the foyer. She'd only been inside a few times when meeting Andrew after class, and she couldn't remember a thing because everything had changed. The building had received a complete upgrade. A warmth of satisfaction spread through her at the thought of her alumni dollars being put to good use. Nina followed signage to the hall of instructor offices. Andrew's door had been the second to the right, and she marched down the hall and stopped. Light shined into the hallway from his open door, and a sudden onset of dizziness came over her. She stumbled over to the wall and rested her head against the cold surface until the spinning subsided. Nina inhaled and exhaled once. I can do this. I didn't come all this way just to give a speech. Nina took another calming breath. We've got unfinished business. So what? It's been nearly 2 decades. One more calming breath, and she stood, squared her shoulders, moved to the open door and tapped twice. Help me, Lord. Come in. How had she forgotten the smoothness of his tenor voice? She could have melted on the spot when he looked up from his laptop and his almond eyes took hold of hers, laced with a softness she probably didn't deserve from him. He was happy to see her. She gripped the doorknob to steady herself. Too bad there was nothing to steady the flip-flop going on with the rapid pacing of her heart. His features hadn't changed much, but it was apparent he'd aged. His physical maturity served him well. The light stubble under his chin, the dark, cleanly shaven mustache, his strong jawline set against the canvas of his mahogany skin. If she had to die soon, she knew right then that she wanted to spend her last days with him.
Ooh. Okay. All right. So, now I'm listening to you and I'm like, wow, I wonder what he thought when you got to read the book, but I wonder what he thought when he saw her, after such a period of time, and she said he was happy to see her. That's the thing about when you love somebody, when you truly love them, and, if time goes by and you see them again, you can feel that spark. You can feel that magic. And, and it's funny because, you have to be able to recognize that magic. And so let me ask you this. Do your characters have a lot of magic between them?
Oh, yes. I love Nina and Andrew's story. I love them. They are so real to me. I feel like I went to school with them. So, yes.
That brings me up another writer's question. How do you know as a writer that you've got your characters fully developed to the point that, they feel real, as if, they could, if you had the power to manifest them off the page, you can bring them into the natural. How do you develop characters to that point where they just feel like, I know these people inside and out?
And I think it's just that, because if I can walk away from my computer and I feel like I can still feel them, or even not when I'm not even working, those people are still on my mind. I feel like I've developed a person. Like, it's not just a name on, in a book. I've developed a person because now I'm thinking about them. I can see them. I feel like they're talking to me. Oh gosh, that sounds crazy.
No, that's a writer. That's a writer.
I see this. Oh yeah. So that's what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that way too. Whenever I write, I get into something called flow. When I'm writing, the entire day can go by, and I'm stuck in this world that I've created. No, I wouldn't say stuck. I'm engulfed, enraptured in this world that I have created in my mind. And it feels real. I feel their emotions. I feel their ups and downs. I feel everything with the characters. Is that true for you as well? Do you feel them?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's how you know that you've done a good job developing them. Because if I can't feel them, then I need to go back. I need to stop and ask myself all those crazy questions that writers like to ask their characters, It's like, I need you to talk to me, person, so I can get to know who you are. I've said that. I told you I printed their pictures off and hung them up in my office. And, sometimes I'd say that to them. Like, I need you to talk to me. I need you to tell me. Tell me how you want to deal with this. Like, who are you? I need to feel you. Because I need to take Natasha out of it. And we need to put you in it.
Right. I got that. Let me ask you, when a reader picks up this particular title, what do you want them to take away from it at the end of the book?
Oh, yes. So knowing that, tough times are going to come, and just being able, and just knowing that love and God can guide you through anything, because bad things are going to happen. But just, being firm in your faith and being firm in love, knowing that those things will carry you through, and just not to lose hope. Because there were some times in the book where things seemed hopeless. And a lot of times in life, things do seem hopeless. It seems like we're not going to get to the other side of whatever we're going through. But just standing firm in faith.
Yeah. And that reminds me, I think people read romance books, partly for escapism, partly for entertainment, and partly for fantasy of, having that happily ever after. I think everybody wants the happily ever after. And so do you think, not only in romance books, but do you think in life that people find their happily ever after?
Do I think they do? Oh,
yes.
Absolutely. I'd like to believe that they do. It may not happen the way it happens in romance novels, or as quickly as it sometimes seems to happen. But I do believe that people find it happily ever after.
Yeah, I do too. And I think, the road to getting to that happily ever after starts with, strong communication between people, honesty, truthfulness, and vulnerability. People don't necessarily understand the power of being vulnerable, and protecting that sacred space of vulnerability within a relationship. And so I think that's important. So real quickly, with with this title, can you tell us when it's coming out?
October 5th, 2021.
October 5th, did you say?
Yes.
Oh, that's a day before my birthday.
Really? Happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you.
That's one of my good friend's birthday too, October 6th.
Yeah. So, I'm 25. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I haven't aged a day over 25.
I know you may feel like it.
Yeah, okay, yep, I feel like it. Well, what does it say? I feel like it, therefore I am.
There you go. That's right.
So that's what I'll say about that. And real quickly, where can people purchase the book, find you, and give us your social media information?
Okay, so the book can be purchased if they want autographed copies from our website, which is my name, NatashaFrazier.com. The Kindle copy, of course, is on Amazon, and the paperback can be purchased online anywhere paperbacks are sold. Online on Instagram, I'm author_Natasha Frazier. On Twitter, I'm author_Natasha S. And on Facebook, it's my name, Natasha Frazier.
Right. Now, is there an audiobook coming, perhaps?
Yes, we will get this in audio production because the rest of my fiction is in audio production. So we will definitely work on audiobooks as well.
Well, that's wonderful. And real quickly, Natasha, I want to ask you one last question, and this is for all of the would-be writers out there because, actually, I'm going to back that up. I'm going to say two questions. And the first question is going to be, what are some compliments that readers have given you about your work?
That they've been inspired, that they love that the work is inspiring but not preachy. That's one of the main things that they stick out. They love that the characters are real. They feel like the characters are real, and that they like that the characters are put into real life situations. So it's not necessarily glossed over type situations. For example, in my Love, Lives, and Consequences series, the first book, my main character deals with, she starts off celibate because she's trying to be celibate, but she does have some slip-ups. And so, that's a real thing. People do have issues with sex outside of marriage. There are people who want to wait. And so that can be hard. And so that's one of the things that we deal with in book 1 of Love, Lives, and Consequences.
Okay, so let me make sure I get this right. I want to make sure I'm correct. Mm-hmm. So the book that's coming out October 5th is a second book in a series. Am I understanding that correctly?
No. So it's the first book in a new series, the McCall family series.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's the first book in a new series, the McCall family series. Okay, so the first book is written. So do you have the title for the second book, or is it still in production?
It is. We're actually editing it now, and I have a title, but I won't say it because I'm thinking about giving that title to book 3. I think it's more fitting. I always struggle with titles. That is the worst thing. I held on to a book for a year because I didn't have a title. That's just how terrible I am with coming up with titles. I know that's bad. But
no,
there's no book to. It's coming.
Yeah, I agree with you. Coming up with a book title is tough, especially when you want the title to be catchy enough that people want to pick it up and turn a page. or turn it over to read the back cover. Coming up with a title that's sort of familiar to people, that they'll get it, but isn't trendy, so that 10 years from now people are like, what? Because slang comes and goes, because if I go back to the 90s with Naughty by Nature, everybody's going hip hop, hooray, ho. Now there's a whole new generation like, what?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. If you go back to the 80s, people are like, totally tubular, like, what? But yeah, you try to pick up phrases that are timeless, or something in your book that you can, pluck out that's timeless, that will stick in people's memory. And, that could be hard. I think about the book Harry Potter. Who knew?
Right?
Right. You're like, who knew? She kept that simple. Harry Potter. Like, who knew?
Sometimes it's just, that's what we have to do. Just keep it simple. But sometimes it just seems like simple is just too simple.
Yeah. Sometimes we think that simple is just, too simple. And my last question for you is for all of those would-be writers out there who are, voracious readers and feel like, that one day they'll write a book, but, they're in their head and they don't know what to do or where to start. What advice would you give to an aspiring writer?
I would say, I know that sounds simple, but to give yourself 15 minutes at the computer screen, or, if you want to write on paper, or however you want to do it. But just set a timer and put something on the paper, because one thing we have to remember is that the first draft, the rough draft is just that. It's a rough draft. It's not the end product. You can go back and perfect it later and then send it to your editor to, further perfect it. But it doesn't have to be perfect the first time. The point of the first draft is just to get it all out of your head and onto paper. So it can be terrible. Yeah, just get it out there.
Right. And then one thing that I learned from all of my writing instructors and coaches is that, remember, writing and rewriting and rewriting. You're going to rewrite several times before you get, your finished product. And ironically, you can even have your finished product and come back to it later, years later, and say, you know what, I could have wrote better than that. I could have did this. I could have did this. But at some point, you do have to let the writing go and let it stand on its own and let your baby go. Because, that's what I call my writing. I call them my babies. And I say, when I'm writing, I say I'm pregnant and I'm giving birth. And so I've been pregnant 25 times, child, 25 times. Well, heck, I think I'm pregnant with triplets right now. So I have some babies to deliver.
Well, Natasha,
girl, I've been pushing. I've been pushing, and it's crowded and it's crowded in there. Everybody wants their story to be told now. So it's a chore to say, okay, be quiet. We're focusing on this. So yeah, I get that. Yeah. So Natasha, thank you so much for taking some time with us here on A Reader's Paradise. And one more time, please give us the title of your book that's coming out in October, and again, where people can purchase it.
With Every Breath, Book 1 in the McCall family series, can be purchased from Amazon, the Kindle copy or paperback. An autographed copy can be purchased from our website, NatashaFrazier.com.
Again, thank you so much for being with us. And that does it for this. Right. And thank you for being with us. And that does it for this edition of A Reader's Paradise. Hi,
This is Earl Sewell, host of the podcast A Reader's Paradise. I'm here to let you know about a new audio drama that I have created called Lenny Gray. It is a bi-weekly show that you can find out on Apple Podcasts, on Spreaker.com, on Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts. So, what I'm doing here right now is giving you a preview of the show. Season 1 is up and running, and I hope that you will go over, check it out, leave a rating, and a review. Until then, I hope you enjoy this preview of the audio drama, Lenny Gray. Katie Books Productions presents Lenny Gray, an audio drama, written, produced, and narrated by Earl Sewell. Previously on Lenny Gray.
Like God is nearby trying to warn you or tell you that you're doing something he don't like. To me, Curly, it's like God being the moon and the stars. At night, whenever I go out, the moon follow me all the time, like God is in it, watching me. Lenny, that ain't no God. What? God is real, Curly. Don't go around saying stuff like that. If he is real, he wouldn't let bad things happen to good people like my grandmama. Far as I can tell, the onlyest real thing is the devil. He shows up everywhere. I figure I might as well praise him instead of God. As far as I can tell, all the evil people in the world gets all the riches in the world. Must be what the devil wants. That's why all the good people get done wrong. They worship a God that don't give them a goddamn thing. Stop talking like that, Curly. You talking like you're crazy. Like your mind got twisted or something. You must have been out in the sun too long. I ain't been out in the sun too long. I know what my name is, I know what a dead is, and my mind ain't abnormal. I'm telling you the truth, Lenny. No need to be afraid of truth.
Curly finished cleaning the fish and headed into the house so that a meal could be prepared. Lenny Gray remained outside, looking up at the heavens and wondering why Curly didn't believe in God or see God the way she did. She did not understand that Curly was a secular man and not guided by the Holy Spirit. People in town enjoyed sitting around with narratives in their heads and unspoken words in their mouths. Sometimes, their internal stories were courageous and defiant, but most times, their narratives got stuck in conformity and misery. When they saw Lenny Gray on her father's porch one morning, it surprised them. After all, she had not been back to her father's shanty since she'd gotten married. They noticed her belly was as round as a cantaloupe, and it gave them something to speak about other than their unavoidable suffering. "You's carrying that baby kind of high, means that you can have a baby girl." Robin May's voice carried itself across the road. Lenny Gray was on her knees washing soiled bed sheets in a tin tub because her father's wife, Lulabelle, had taken sick with the flu and didn't have the strength to get out of bed to use the night bucket. Robin May was an elderly midwife who had delivered a number of children just like Curly's grandmother Mary had. Since Lenny Gray never got a chance to know her own mother, and since Ida wasn't known for her maternal instincts, she listened to women like Robin May, even though she knew they gossiped too much. She allowed whatever nugget of wisdom she could understand to fill the space in her heart and mind that longed for a mother figure. "Now, look like you carrying that baby high in your hips and butt. You was having a boy for sure," said Lorraine, who had 6 children. They were confusing her, and she didn't know what to make of all of their guessing. "Lenny Gray, child, if you done had any dreams about snakes, like you say you done had, you was having a boy, said her cousin, Tangy May, who had just exited the shanty opposite her. Tangy May had a small pot in her hand and started walking towards Lenny Gray. Lorraine and Robin May decided to keep the remainder of their comments to themselves. Lenny, I was wondering if I can get 2 cups of cornmeal from you out of your daddy's house. I know it ain't proper to ask you instead of his wife, but I don't want to be no bother while she down sick. Tangy May was 18, and like Lenny Gray, had dreams of leaving Alabama. Tangy May was a short and compact woman. Her skin was gingerbread brown, and she had a black mole on her upper lip, positioned close to her right nostril. She had 4 braids in her hair, one on the left side, right side, one at the top of her head, and one at the rear of it.